of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, the first volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios. Anxiety is the work of the devil, the continuation. Yeroda, how should a person who is by nature a thinker and exerts pressure on himself avoid becoming overwhelmed? If he remains simple, he will not get tired. But if there is egoism, no matter how small, then one wants to do everything to perfection and tries to avoid mistakes at any cost. This is why even the slightest mistake makes him tired. A mistake here and there will not hurt, even if one gets a little reprimand for it. Your question, for example, applies better to a judge who constantly has to face difficult cases and is afraid that he might give the wrong judgment and cause innocent souls to be punished. In the spiritual life, a person who has many responsibilities gets a headache when she runs into an impasse. This happens when her decisions affect others and she must make sure that no one is wronged. In other words, this kind of problem arises when our conscience is constantly being challenged. You must be very careful, sister, to live the spiritual life with your heart rather than your mind. And never do a job without first putting your trust in God with great humility. Otherwise, you will agonize over it and end up exhausting your mind and soul. Usually, it is lack of faith that hides behind agony. But pride can cause agony too. Monasticism needs austerity. Oh, these gray blankets have made your living room look so nice. This is exactly what is needed. Yeroda, how can a monastic decide whether something fits in a monastery or not? One should begin by asking, who am I and what are my obligations based on the life I lead? The khaki uniform dignifies the army. The black habit dignifies the monastic. It is not fitting for the army to dress in black and the monastic in khaki. Now imagine that you wore white like nurses. You are both called sisters, right? And nurses wore black. That would be so depressing to the patients. They would become desperate and think to themselves, it looks like we're going to die, and they are not being honest with us. No matter how you look at it, the color does not fit. Something, of course, may be beautiful, but that does not make it suitable for the monastic life. Velvet is beautiful, but if I wear a velvet cloak, it will not honor me, it will disgrace me. Do not use bright colors, such as red and so on. It is not right. In other words, Yeroda, everything must be colorless, tasteless. Spiritual taste will follow. It is important that we understand the difference. People have yet to grasp the sheer joy of simplicity. Look at me. I wet the broom and I sweep the spider webs from the chimney in my kalivi. I only do this once a year. The wet broom creates beautiful designs, black and white shapes on the ceiling. If someone were to see them, he would think that I have painted it. Do you know how much I enjoy it? I know monks who cannot really enjoy this spiritual spirit because they rejoice in the worldly spirit. They have never felt the thrill, the joy that comes from simplicity. Austerity and frugality are of great help to the spiritual life. A monk should only own what he needs and what is appropriate to his way of life. He should limit himself to what will ease his life a bit, and not aspire to worldly possessions. For example, a military blanket will take care of his needs. He does not need a colorful or embroidered blanket. This is how simplicity and spiritual valor take root. Give things to a monk, and you will destroy him. It is when he rids himself of what he owns that he finds peace. The monk who collects things will end up destroying himself. When people send me gifts, I feel so much burdened by them that I want to get rid of them right away. Or if I have something that I do not need in my monastic cell, I feel as if I am wearing a very tight shirt. If I cannot find someone to give them to, it is best that I throw them away. As soon as I get rid of them, I feel such relief. I feel free. A friend came to see me once. Yeroda, he said, so-and-so gave me these things to bring you, and asked that you pray for him to get rid of his anxiety. Take them away, I said. I do not want his anxiety to come to me. I am too old now to be going around distributing things. The elder used to distribute the gifts he received from visitors to other monks who were in need. The things that lay people find convenient enslave the monk instead of helping him. We must try to minimize our needs and simplify our lives. Otherwise, we will never be free. Of course, there is a difference between being clean and living in luxury. Using the same tool for different jobs will help us minimize our needs. At Sinai Monastery, I used a tin can for making both tea and porridge. How many things do you think a person needs in order to survive? In the old days in the desert, they only ate dates. They did not even light a fire. They did not need wood. Even these days, I put a handle on an old milk can and use it for making tea or coffee. It warms up nicely in the blow lamp. But if you use a pot for making coffee or tea, you need to use a lot of alcohol to warm it. With a can, by contrast, it only takes a bit of cotton and a little alcohol, and the coffee is done. I don't use a lamp for a light. A candle is enough to take me through the evening. In general, it helps a lot to keep things simple. You should own simple and sturdy things. What is humble and simple is appreciated even by lay people, and it certainly helps the monk. It makes us focus on poverty, pain, and the monastic life. Once, King George of Greece visited the monastery of Great Lavra on Mount Athos, and the father served him using a silver tray. When he saw it, he said, "I was expecting something simpler from you, perhaps a wooden tray. I am tired of silver trays." You have yet to grasp fully how sweet simplicity really is. It is so refreshing. Look at this beautiful hanger that I made out of a bobbin. Very practical. You, on the other hand, go through all this trouble. You have to put these very thin nails on the wall to hang your cassocks. If a bit of plaster drops when you remove the cassock, you have to clean the area every time. Why not put larger hooks on the wall? So many empty walls and not a single nail on them. Instead, you use wooden hangers which need to be polished, dusted, and so on. Instead of simplifying things to save time, you do the opposite. You struggle to reach perfection in material things and suffer from it. It is in spiritual things that you should strive for perfection. Do not use all your energy to make things artistic. Use it instead to make your soul a work of art. Day and night, you should aim at the perfection of your soul. If you use your artistic talents for the benefit and cultivation of your soul, your little spiritual palace will be full of joy. Yeroda, some people say that monasteries helped preserve civilization because they had in their possession so many treasures. They probably mean the relics and antiquities. Do you know when most of these treasures were collected? They were collected after the fall of Constantinople. Most of them used to be in the palaces. Later, they were taken to monasteries for safekeeping. Queen Maro, for example, took them gradually from the Sultan and gave them to monasteries. Queen Maro was the daughter of the Serbian prince George Branković. He was the second founder of the Holy Monastery of St. Paul on the Holy Mountain. Maro married Sultan Murat, the father of Mohammed the Conqueror, and donated to the Monastery of St. Paul the holy gifts of the Magi, and many sacred relics and heirlooms. Preserved to this day at the St. Paul Monastery is the original will of Queen Maro, by which she bequeathed to the monastery all the movable valuables that she possessed. Others would bequeath them to a monastery upon their death to prevent them from being lost. It was not the monasteries that sought these treasures, it was their owners who wanted to put them there for safekeeping. Others would give their wealth to the monasteries of the Holy Mountain to feed and care for the poor. In those days, there were no homes for the aged, orphanages, psychiatric hospitals, or philanthropic institutions. Big estates were also donated to the monasteries so that they could have the means to provide assistance to the many lay people in need. Those were difficult times, but people back then had the vision to first help the people materially through the monasteries so that they could eventually help them spiritually. When poor people went to the monasteries, the monks would give them a small blessing, like some money, so that in this way they could provide for the marriage of their son or daughter. Their aim, in other words, was to give help to the poor. This is why they built all those big buildings. Do you know how many people the monasteries helped during the German occupation? Thousands. Back then, when a family was particularly hospitable, they were called Karakalos, after Karakalu Monastery. Karakalu Monastery is one of the 20 monasteries on the holy mountain of Athos, which was famous for its hospitality. The monasteries had great celebrations on the feast of their patron saints for a reason. Poor people could come, eat a little bit of fish, and have a good time, but also benefit spiritually. Do we have any reason today to hold such great feasts? What is the point of feeding people fish, since they are no longer in need? Luxuries will turn monks into worldly people. Yeroda, how much decoration is appropriate for a church? Considering the era in which we live, which is not Byzantium, the simpler the decoration is, the more it helps. Even in a church, simplicity always helps. What would be a good design for the church iconostasis, for example? A monastic design. It should be modest and simple. Saint Pachomios had a column made crooked so that people would not admire his work. Saint Pachomios was born in Upper Thebes of Egypt, about 280 AD. After completing his military service, he began his ascetic life in an abandoned pagan temple. In about 320, after a divine vision in which an angel gave him a board on which was written the rule for the Cenobitic life, he founded the first monastery in Upper Thebes. In all, he founded 9 monasteries for men and 2 for women. He fell asleep in the Lord in 346, He is considered the founder of the Cenobitic life. Do you recall what happened? He had constructed a church in the monastery with great diligence and made the columns using clay bricks. When he saw how beautiful the church was, he felt great joy. But then he realized that rejoicing for the beautiful work of his hands was not God's will. He tied the columns with ropes, and after he prayed, he asked the brothers to pull on the ropes until the columns became crooked. Every year at the Kalivi, I cut metal sheets and patch my leaky roof and my broken windows so that the wind will not come in. I use wooden planks and nylon. Now you might say, why don't you put in double windows? I know how to do that. I am a carpenter. If I wanted to, I could have made windows with triple barriers, but then there would be no monastic spirit left inside. My wall is in shambles. I could have asked others to help me take care of things in the Kalivi, but I can get by the way things are. Why should I spend money on a wall when there is so much need elsewhere? A new wall is of no help to me. If I have a 500 drachma bill, I prefer to buy small crosses and icons and give them to hurting people that they may have some consolation. It gives me great joy to give to others. Even if I really need something, I will not spend the money on myself. Just as at the start of spiritual life, the novice cannot get enough of his new life, so too, when we start enjoying beautiful things, it is difficult to stop. Do you know what you need to do? You need to stop taking care of well-made buildings. Do and build only what is absolutely necessary for your lives. Instead, turn your attention to human misery. If you have things to give away, give them to those in need. If you don't, then pray. Pray and do only those chores that are absolutely necessary. The many things that usually take up our time are short-lived. Is it worth wasting our lives this way when so many are suffering or dying from starvation? Simple buildings and humble belongings mentally transport the monastic to the caves and austere dwellings of our holy fathers and are of great spiritual benefit. However, worldly belongings remind us of the world we left behind, and cause monastic souls to become secular. Recently, this was said in 1986, excavations in Nitria, located in Egypt northwest of Cairo, toward the Libyan desert, the cradle of Christian asceticism, unearthed the first cells of the monks who had lived there, their ascetic dwellings. During the excavation, they also found monastic cells that were built at a later time. They realized that these latter were far closer to secular standards than the very first structures. When even more recent monastic cells were unearthed, they saw that they resembled the living rooms of a wealthy person of that time. They had paintings and pictures on the walls, and so on. It was these well-decorated cells that brought the wrath of God. Criminals came and robbed and destroyed them. Christ was born in a manger. If we find comfort in worldly things, Christ will spit on us, something he never did to anyone. I had nothing, he will tell us. Is that what is written in the gospel? Did you see me do as you are doing? You are not lay people, nor are you monastics. What should I do with you now? Where should I put you? What is beautiful and artistically well made belongs to the world. It cannot comfort those who want to live a spiritual life. There is no wall that will not eventually be torn down. A single soul is worth more than the entire world. What do we do for our souls? We must start working spiritually and have only the right kind of concern. Christ will ask us what spiritual work we have accomplished and how we have helped the world in spiritual matters. He will not want to know what buildings we built. He will not even mention them. It is according to our spiritual progress that we will be judged. I want you to really grasp the spirit of what I am saying. I am not saying that we must not build buildings, or that we are not to construct them well. What I am saying is that we must first take care of the spiritual life and then look at the rest. And whatever we do, we must do with spiritual discernment. Simplify your lives. Worldly people say, "How lucky are the wealthy that live in big and luxurious mansions and have all the comforts and conveniences." Blessed, rather, are those who have succeeded in simplifying their lives and freeing themselves from the noose of worldly progress, from the many comforts that cause much discomfort, and have rid themselves of the dreadful anxiety of today's times. If we refuse to simplify our lives, we will suffer. If we live simply, all our anxiety will go away. At Sinai, a German visitor told a very intelligent Bedouin boy, "You are intelligent. You can become literate." And then the boy asked, "Well then, you will become a car mechanic." And then the boy asked again, "Then you will open a car shop. And then you will hire others to work for you, and you will have your own staff." In other words, the boy said, "I will start with one headache, and then add another and another. Isn't it better now with my mind free of worries?" Most headaches are the result of the thoughts we have about doing this and doing that. But if our minds were engaged with spiritual matters, we would feel divine consolation and would not suffer from headaches. When I meet with lay people, I stress simplicity. Many of the things they do are unnecessary and only bring anxiety. I speak to them about frugality, austerity, and asceticism. I constantly remind them, if you want to get rid of anxiety, simplify your lives. Anxiety and being too busy are the cause of most divorces. People have too many things to do, too many obligations, and they get dizzy just thinking about it. The mother and the father both work and neglect the children. They are tired, irritable. Small reasons, big quarrels, automatic divorce. That's how it all ends up. If they had simplified their lives, they would have had both relief and joy. Anxiety is catastrophic. Once I was at a very luxurious house. We were talking, and they said, "We live in paradise, while other people are in such great need." "You live in hell," I replied. God said to the rich man, "Fool, this night your soul shall be required of you." Luke chapter 12, verse 20. If Christ were to ask me, "Where should I put you, in a house like this or in a prison?" I would reply, "In a dark prison." A prison would do me good. It would remind me of Christ, of the holy martyrs and the ascetics who lived in the holes of the earth. It would remind me of the monastic life. The prison would look like my monastic cell, and I would be happy. But what can your house remind me of? How can it help me? This is why I find prison cells much more restful than the most comfortable living room. I even find them more restful than a beautiful monastic cell. I would rather spend 1,000 nights in a prison cell than one day in a luxurious house. Once I was staying with a friend in Athens. He asked me to receive a family man who could see me only very early in the morning at dawn, because that was the only time he had available. He arrived in a cheerful mood, praising God. He was full of humility and simplicity and asked me to pray for his family. He was about 38 years old and had 7 children. Together with his wife, parents, and children, they were 11 souls. They all shared the same room. He spoke with great simplicity. The room fits us all if we stand up, but gets a bit tight when we lie down. Thank God, now we are constructing a shed to use as a kitchen, and we are doing fine, Father, he said. At least we have a roof over our heads. other people have to live in the open air. The man earned a living ironing. He lived in Athens and had to leave every day before dawn to get to Piraeus on time for work in a dry cleaning shop. He was suffering from varicose veins because he was on his feet for long hours. His legs bothered him a lot, but he had such love for his family that he forgot his pain and discomfort. In fact, he blamed himself constantly for not having, as he said, any love in his heart and not doing good deeds as a Christian should. He praised his wife for being charitable. Besides taking care of her children and her parents-in-law, she would wash the clothes of elderly men in the neighborhood, tidy up their homes, and even cook a little something like soup for them. One could see divine grace painted on the face of this good family man. He had Christ inside him and was full of joy. His one-room house was a paradise of happiness. Compare this man with people whose hearts are not filled with Christ, but with anxiety. Take 2 of them and try to fit them in a house with 11 rooms. It will not be big enough for them, and yet these 11 people with Christ all fit in one room. Even spiritual people may not be able to live together in the same place. No matter how much space they may have, they cannot fit because Christ does not fit in them. If the women of Pharasa could see the many luxuries that people have today, including that of some monasteries, they would say, "We people have been abandoned by God. He will send down fire and burn us." I remember how quickly, briskly, they did their daily chores. They had to take the goats out first thing in the morning and then do the housework. After that, they would go to the chapels or gather in caves, and those who could read would read the lives of that day's saints from the Synaxari, Lives of Saints. Next, they would do their prostrations and say the Jesus prayer. And they worked. They got tired. In those days, a woman had to know how to make and mend clothes. They made the clothes by hand and mended them by hand. There were a few sewing machines in cities, but no sewing machines in the villages. In the entire town of Pharasa, there was at best 1 manual sewing machine. They even sewed the men's clothes. They made them really comfortable. They knit socks by hand. They put their whole self into their daily chores. They had a caring taste, but because they did things in a simple way, they always had time to do all these chores. The people of Pharasa did not pay attention to details. They lived and enjoyed the pleasures of monastic life. If, for example, a blanket hung unevenly over one side of the bed, and you said to them, "Straighten out the blanket," they would reply, "Why, does this prevent you from praying?" This type of monastic joy is unknown today. Most people believe that it is not good to be deprived of anything, to face hardships. But if they thought in monastic terms and lived with more simplicity, they would find the peace they are seeking. Instead, they suffer, filled with anxiety and despair. They say, "So-and-so was very successful because he built 2 apartment buildings, or because he learned 5 languages, and I do not even own 1 apartment or speak 1 foreign language. Oh, I am good for nothing." A person with a car thinks, "That man has a better car than I do. I should buy one like that too." When he gets the better car, he feels no joy because the third person's car is even better. And when he goes and gets the best car he can buy, he finds out that others have their own private airplane, and he is unhappy again. There is no end to this. Compare him with someone who never owned a car but feels such joy when he praises God. "Thank God," he says, "I may not have a car, but my legs are strong and I can walk." There are so many people in the world that do not have full use of their legs and cannot take care of their own needs or go for walks. Thank God I have my legs. And a person with a bad limp finds joy in this thought. There are some people who are missing both legs. Dear listeners, our time is up. Thank you for listening. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.